Okay, final exam. So the final exam will be pretty similar to the midterm. It will be multiple choice. The only difference is that you have 3 hours, okay? So you did about 34 questions in 1 hour, and the class average is 78, okay? So that means you're pretty good at doing exams, or at least the course material is somewhat simple, okay? So for the final exam, I'm probably going to increase the number of questions by a little bit, but just increase a little bit the difficulty, okay? Instead of giving you 70 questions and then you're just like, you know, I'll just give you a little bit more questions, but they will be a little bit more complex. What do I mean by complex? I've asked you pretty much anything simple that I can ask you related to the course material. You know, disaccharides, you know, proteins, you know, aldosterone, you know, that, like specifics, right? So now I'm going to be testing a little bit more your thinking. So it will be more scenarios than just remembering from the slides, okay? I've been talking throughout the semester about situations that happen to give you kind of a way of thinking, right? And so I'll give an example that you're probably tired of hearing about, but if I talk to you about celiac disease and then I talk to you about some deficiency and I ask you why is there that deficiency, and you have to answer based on what happens to your intestine and what gets, you know, this type of question, not what does gastrin do, right? That's a little bit too simple. Now you know the material pretty well. I can see it in your grades. The class average, I think, is like 80% or something like this. So this is like chilling, okay? So obviously you need to learn from this. So the questions will be more context-based than remembering. Obviously you need to know the concepts, but there will be more thinking, okay? But don't worry, I'm not gonna kill you. It's the same level of, same person giving the questions, same person teaching. Yes? Obviously, I'm not going to ask you what's the RDA of magnesium, you know? I don't even know it. But there are some numbers that are important to remember. For example, you need to know that the AMDR for carbohydrates is 45 to 65%, right? And you need to know why it goes higher or lower, okay? You need to understand what's the AMDR for lipids, the AMDR for proteins. You need to understand how much calories you're getting from a lipid, how much calories are you getting from a carbohydrates, things of the sort. But specifics about each nutrient, I will not ask you that, okay? If I need you to think based on, like for example, alcohol, I've never told you how much energy it gives you, right? But I think in the quiz, I told you it's between carbohydrates and lipids. And so then, just by calculating, you're able to deduce that it's 1,806 kilocalories from that whole calculation, right? Logically, if you think, you know that alcohol has more carbons, usually has more carbons than, or close to sugar, and resembles glycerol. So you can expect kind of, right? A similar amount, but even then you didn't need to know that. But if I need you to do some sort of calculation based on RDAs or whatever, I will tell you in the exam, okay? So don't worry, it's going to be fair. I'm not those type of professors that make you remember like numbers and make you remember stuff. I think that's kind of stupid. I don't even know them by heart, okay? Because I know that if I need them, I will just go Google them, and I'll probably teach this class in the future. I'll still have to review them, okay? So this is not what's being tested here. I'm more of the type to ask you about how you think, and a little bit of what you remember related to, you know, certain proteins, certain hormones, things of the sort, okay? There's no point in remembering the Avogadro number after doing 3-4 chemistry classes and you're still 10 years later. I never used it, right? So what's the point of remembering the RDA for magnesium, right? Useless. What else? The classroom for the final is MB 3210. So it's on the 3rd floor. Don't go, on the subfloors there, because usually that's where the biology classes have their finals. This time is on the 3rd floor of the MB building. If you're lost, send me an email or something, I'll come get you. You laugh, but I've had people, I used to before put my phone number so students call me, especially for the 261 class, the first year, and you'd laugh like how many students get lost. And you just receive a call and they're telling you, sir, where's the class? I can't find it, right? So if you get lost, just send me an email and I'll come find you. For the ACSD students, unfortunately, you're going to have to wait until I finish with the regular group. In the midterm, I only found 2 students in the room. So that's a good sign. So just wait. If you have questions, I'll come see you when the regular group is done. If it is after 2 hours, then you'll get me for more time. If it's after 3 hours, then you'll get me for an hour and something. Okay? Questions? No? Okay. So today's lecture is a little bit repetitive because many of the things that we learned in the past lectures apply to whatever we're going to learn today, and many of the nutrients we learned previously apply to today's lecture. So you might find it a little bit repetitive. I'll try to make it less boring, but it's just to have the information related to this topic in one lecture, okay? So today we're going to talk about bone health and blood health, okay? As you know, how many bones do we have? Isn't it 6? 3? I remember from Deadpool, and I was going to make the joke, but I think it's a little bit displaced. If you watch Deadpool, you probably know what I'm talking about. If not, then watch it tonight. Yeah, so I think between 203 and 206, I forgot. But basically, bones are quite important, as you know, as they serve for structure and many things. They are considered living organs because they have, obviously, living cells, and they have different types of cells. They're quite complex. I used to think that they're just made of calcium, but actually, no. They're made up of cells and many different types of cells. There is bone cells, if you remember from the past or any of your biology classes, you probably talked about osteoblasts and osteoclasts. If not, we're going to talk about it today. There are nerves. Obviously, if you get hurt on the bone, you'll feel it. Cartilage, which is kind of linking everything. And you have connective tissue. Connective tissue is pretty much found everywhere in your body, but your bones also have connective tissue. If you ever take an anatomy class, you learn each one of them, their name. This is not the purpose here. And so the bones are quite complex. They have blood vessels in them that carry nutrients to them. They have cells in them that do have metabolic roles, and we're going to talk about that today, okay? From the perspective of nutrition. So obviously, that provides strength and flexibility. They contain mostly minerals, but they also have organic structures. And these organic structures allow for the flexibility of the bone, okay? For example, one of the organic structures that it has is collagen, which is a fibrous protein found in the bone. There's also hydroxyapatite, which is kind of these crystals that are around collagen that basically allow your body to carry weight, okay? So it's because of this thing here, hydroxyapatite, okay? There's 2 parts to the bone. If you've ever seen a dissection or kind of a cross-section of a bone, you realize that the middle is kind of mushy. This is called the trabecular bone, and then you have the cortical, which is the outer kind of layer. The outer layer is the most basically the biggest in terms of surface area. It is 80% of your skeleton, and it's the most compact part of the bone. While the trabecular bone is about 20% of the skeleton, and this is where everything happens in terms of making new bone cells, breaking down the bone to release calcium and whatnot. It has a fast turnover rate, so this is something that we're going to talk about today, meaning that this part keeps changing all the time, okay? This is quite constant, but the inner of the bone changes. So there's, yeah.
The outer side acellular and the third side inside.
Sorry?
Is it acellular, the compact bone? Or it's
Yes, it is acellular. It's mineral mostly. Yep. The cellular part is the inside here. Okay. You also have inside the bone marrow. And the bone marrow, there are two types. There's the red bone marrow, it looks like this here, which is found in the flat bones of your body, so your hips, for example, the ribs, skull, and in the longer bones, like, for example, the femur. The yellow marrow is found in kind of the narrow section in the middle of long bones as well, but in basically the way to remember them, flat surfaces, is red marrow, and then the remainder of the bones, let's say, is the yellow marrow. Okay. Anybody here eats this? Since it's a nutrition class. You do? Yeah. So there's people that eat the bone marrow. I've tried a few times. Doesn't work with my brain. It doesn't accept it. Some people like it though. Full of nutrients, obviously, a lot of proteins and whatnot. Okay. The bone marrow is one of the most expensive tissues or fluid to obtain for research because it is quite complex to get, and you cannot get it just randomly. Not many people want to be, drill the hole in their spine to get that fluid. Okay. So in research, when you have that kind of sample, you try to preserve it, and it costs a lot. Okay. So bone development is divided in few phases. Okay. The first phase starts when you are born, not even born, when you are still in your mother's womb, and this is where your bones start actually growing. Okay. And as you grow up, they start being modeled. Okay. They start taking the shape that they are supposed to take. For example, a baby's skull is not the same as the adult skull. If you've ever seen kids that are quite young, they have this part here that is quite fragile, and you have to be careful with that. So this is because the bone is still not taking the shape that it's supposed to take. This usually slows down right after puberty. And then throughout time, there's also a process called bone remodeling, and this happens in many different phases of your life. It allows for your bones to rebuild. For example, if you break your bones or whatnot, your bones will be able to regenerate. It replaces old bones into new bones. For example, when you're kind of losing your childhood teeth, let's say. So this is part of it. It involves two processes. The bone resorption, which is kind of reabsorbing the bone itself. So you break it down into smaller pieces and then you reabsorb the minerals and whatnot. And then formation, which is rebuilding. Okay, and there's two types of cells that are important that we'll be talking about. This happens mostly in adulthood. Bone remodeling also happens when you're working out. Okay. I don't know if you've ever worked out or not, but if you do it for quite a while, you'll feel that your bones are getting kind of more rigid. Your brain realizes that your body needs a bigger structure to handle your muscles that you are gaining, for example, and then it will start building bigger bones. Okay, and these people maybe don't know this, but your bones do grow. Obviously, they're not gonna, if you're a bodybuilder, there's a limit to how much they can grow, but they do grow. Cool. So there's a few concepts that we're going to talk about bones that are related to bones, and then we'll talk about the nutrients involved in bone formation and resorption. So the first thing is the density. The density of your bones determines how packed it is in terms of mineral and cells. Obviously, this is dependent on many things. Some people have bigger bones, some people have smaller bones. And then obviously, if you have late puberty, then you lose a little bit of the time that you are growing the bone. You lose this part here, these two here. and so you end up with smaller bones, okay? For example, as I told you with my celiac disease and whatnot, my bones have not switched since the age of maybe 17, okay? This is, for a guy of my size, is quite small, okay? And this is probably due to this first fact here, okay? The opposite is true. Some people have bigger bones, so their density is usually lower. Their bones are less dense. On top of that, obviously, if you have calcium intake that is low, you're not going to be building bones. Low body weight. So as I told you, the bones are meant to handle your body weight. And so as you are growing up, your bones are getting bigger because they need to handle the structure, the new structure, right? And if you work out, you will gain more weight. And if you gain more muscle weight, you need more to handle, right? Which makes me think, I'm not sure if you gain weight, like adipose tissue, it actually affects the growth of your bones. I know for muscles it does, because there is this hormonal aspect of it, but I'm not sure for adipose tissue, okay? So this is something to look into. And obviously physical inactivity also lowers the bone density, okay? So for the remodeling part, what happens is that, as I told you, there are two processes. Usually they are equal in terms of how they happen, and this is important because they need, so while you're in growth, your bone formation is, the process of bone formation is more active than the resorption, right? And so when you reach the remodeling state, usually they are equal, right? Why are they equal? It's because you want to keep the same structure. You just need to kind of recycle and reuse the calcium, ship it somewhere else, and then make new cells, bring more calcium. And so these processes are equal when you are young or when you are a healthy adult. When you reach a certain age, usually around the age of 40, what happens is that the bone density starts decreasing. Why? Because the resorption becomes more prominent than the formation, okay? And we'll see why the formation kind of declines. This is why with age you start losing kind of strength. And you can see elderly people are kind of feeble because they are losing this density in their bones, okay? They become more prone to, for example, breaking their hip. If you fall, you probably won't break your hip. But an elderly person, they break their hip because their bone density is quite low. And so it is low because their resorption process is higher than the formation process, okay? So the thinking I just did, this is the type of thinking I want for the final exam. Okay? Make sense? Yeah? Both. Both.
So the compact section becomes much
Bigger. It takes more space and more dense. Yeah. You have basically more minerals per centimeter cubic, let's say.
Okay, so the density is the same, becomes thinner.
Sorry? No. Because yes, if you take the same amount and make it more dense, it becomes thinner. But it also the bone is growing, right? So it's taking more space, but it's becoming more dense. Make sense? No? Okay. How do I explain this? I have 10 grams of calcium. Okay. I can leave it in here. It's probably not going to be dense, right? I can make it more dense, right? So now it's compact, there's no more space, right? But making it more dense does not mean that it's not also increasing the amount of calcium I have, right? So it can become 15 grams, but still more dense. You understand, right? So this is what I mean. And the density is not only for the outer layer, it's also for the trabecular portion. It becomes more dense, okay? Obviously, if you are eating properly, exercising properly, you'll have stronger bones, you'll have a stronger skeleton, and this can help you protect you against osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is a disease that, when activated, does not have a cure, and I'll talk about this in a second. And this just means that your resorption is much more prominent than formation. This is what osteoporosis is, okay? So what do I mean by resorption specifically? Because I've been talking about it for a few slides. So the surface of the bones is actually broken, and it's broken by these cells. So you have these cells that are found in your trabecular region, okay? And they're going to start eating on the outer layer here, okay? And so there are cells called osteoclasts that will break this part here, okay? By breaking this part here, they will kind of erode the surface of the bone, and what's that going to do is that it's going to release calcium and other minerals, okay? So this process is not just to break the bones, because it would not make sense for your body to do this. It's to reuse those minerals somewhere else, okay? And so when that happens, there's also the opposing process, which is building new bone. And so the building new bone happens through these osteoblasts, okay? The bone builders, which will basically come to the surface and lay collagen that contains, so they will secrete this collagen that will contain components of the bone, okay? And then this will basically fuse with the outer layer. If you need a way to remember this, remember osteoblasts with a B is for building, okay? And then the other, well, no B, so no building, okay? It's one of those things that in the exam you just don't remember, but you know the process. So B, building. What else? So obviously bones have more functions than just giving you a structure for your body and whatnot. They protect your vital organs. Your heart, your lungs are protected by bones. For example, the rib cage. Your skull protects your brain. Obviously, this is simple stuff that you already know. It's nothing new for you guys. But they also provide support for muscles to allow for their movement, because bones have muscles attached to them through tendons. Additionally, they play a role in metabolic processes, and this one maybe you were less aware of it. So bones are a storage reservoir of minerals. In reality, they have a lot of minerals in them, and those minerals are important because they can be released in your body to do whatever is needed, okay? A few minerals that are stored in your bones are calcium, phosphorus, fluoride, and magnesium, okay? But we'll talk about this in a second. And so whenever your body, for example, needs to deal with acidic blood because the pH of your blood decreased, it will start eroding the calcium on the outer layer of the bone, and that calcium will be shipped through the bloodstream to kind of neutralize and buffer the acids, okay? We talked about this previously, and I'm going to talk about it again today. Okay, the boring list that we have to go through. The last lectures are a little bit less interesting in terms of concepts, but part of the course is understanding what each of the minerals and vitamins do. So I'm going to talk about most of these, not all of them. I don't think I'm talking about vitamin K. But if you're interested in the numbers, they're here for your own information. Obviously, you don't need to... Let me just remove this guy. Jeez. Okay. Obviously, you don't need to learn them by heart. You don't even need the slides for this. You can just find all this information online on Health Canada's website. But if you're interested to know how much you need of each of these guys, here it is. So let's start by calcium, the most important one in terms of bone structure. So calcium has many functions. It regulates, it provides structure. It regulates the acid-base balance in your blood and many other processes. It allows for the transmission of nerve impulses. If you remember, I told you that for a neurotransmitter to be released from the presynaptic cell to the postsynaptic cell, you need this influx of calcium in the cell, which allows for the fusion of the vesicle with the membrane. I don't know if you remember this. It assists in muscle contraction. Again, as I told you, calcium is important for pretty much any contraction you have in your body. And so this calcium is important for bringing the filaments together, the cytoskeleton filaments together in a sarcomere. It maintains healthy blood pressure. This one, I think, from last lecture you already know, but electrolytes are important in maintaining blood pressure because they determine the fluid balance outside and inside of the cell, and calcium is one of these. It is important for enzymes that initiate blood clotting. So if you don't have calcium, you can see how this can be a problem. It can lead to bleeding and whatnot. And obviously it serves as a cofactor for hormones and enzymes. All minerals have an enzyme which they serve as a cofactor. Iron, it's heme, etc. Okay? So, little diagram to understand what's happening. So in your body, there are two pathways that regulate the level of calcium in your blood. The first one is the parathyroid hormone pathway, PTH, which is released by the parathyroid glands. And when you have low blood calcium, hypocalcemia, so anytime you have something emia, it means it's in the blood. So calcemia means calcium in the blood. So hypo means low calcium in the blood, okay? Viremia means virus in the blood, etc., okay? So when you have low blood calcium, your parathyroid glands will secrete this PTH hormone, which will do stuff to activate vitamin D. Vitamin D is very important for your bones. And so vitamin D, obviously without even showing you this stuff, you should kind of guess what it does. So if you have low blood glucose and there is a secretion of this hormone that activates vitamin D, then you can imagine that the role of vitamin D is to play on the kidneys, right? Because you want to keep the calcium and not eliminate it. So it will promote the reabsorption of calcium from the blood. It will release calcium into the bloodstream from the bones, right? By breaking down the bones. Through which cells? Clasts or blasts? Huh? There you go. Through the clasts, osteoclasts. They're the ones that break down the bone, okay? And it will increase the absorption of calcium from the intestines. So how can you increase the absorption of calcium from the intestines? What's one way to do it? A little bit of thinking. Let's try this. Yep. Exactly. So if you are increasing the calcium in the bloodstream and you want to increase the absorption in the intestine, so one thing that you can do is increase the transporters of calcium, right? So vitamin D will act on this, okay? And this will increase the blood calcium levels. On the opposite end, if you have too much calcium, then there's another hormone called calcitonin, which is released by the thyroid gland. And this calcitonin, it does basically the opposite. It inactivates vitamin D. Or not vitamin D itself, but the action of vitamin D. So it inhibits something in the pathway of vitamin D, okay? And this will do the opposite, which is decrease the breakdown of bones, decrease the absorption of calcium from the intestines, and decrease the reabsorption of calcium in the kidneys. Simple? Easy? Okay. So, how much do you need? This varies between people, between a gram and 1.3 grams a day. Obviously, it varies with age and your sex, because as you age, you require more to maintain the same amount of solidity or structure, let's say. If you are younger and you're in the growth phase, you require more, etc. Okay? And the upper limit is 2.5 grams per day, and there are many reasons for this. One of them is that calcium, when it does not know where to go, it will start making your soft tissues more rigid, okay? So this is one of the problems, and I'll talk about many other things. So, have you guys ever heard about bioavailability? Okay, so bioavailability just means the amount that is found everywhere in your blood, okay? And so when you take something, not all of it is converted directly into the bloodstream. Some of it is excreted, the other is metabolized and whatnot. And so bioavailability is one of the things that are studied, for example, in clinical trials. One of the first things that you are trying to study is, if I give this person this pill, how much of it gets to the blood, right? And so the body is able to play on the bioavailability of calcium through those two processes, right? The osteoblasts and osteoclasts. And that depends on the age. It depends on many different things, including, for example, factors that bind to calcium. So when you're eating food, there are these phytates and oxalates, which are just molecules that bind to calcium. And because they bind to calcium, they prevent it from being absorbed, okay? And so they decrease its bioavailability in the blood, okay? There's also vitamin D. Vitamin D is very important for this process. And so if you don't have enough vitamin D, then what's going to happen is that your body will not be absorbing as much, and so you'll have a higher bioavailability, okay? What else? Vitamin D is called calcitriol. Calcitriol, that's the active form. Yeah. Yeah.
Does it help with the absorption or transport?
Vitamin D plays a role in many of the subparts of the calcium metabolism, including the transport, including the absorption. So it's like basically controls most of the path, okay? Because it's at the top. So when it activates everything related to calcium. Anybody taking vitamin D supplements? You are? A few people? Medically or just probably? No? Don't want to say. Just in case. Okay. We'll talk about this in a second. So you have to be careful with the vitamin D supplements because they can, depending on how much you're taking and whatnot, and if you're always outside in the sun, you can end up over-calcifying your tissues. Okay, that's one of the things, and you can obviously disbalance the fluid balance and whatnot. So this one is quite simple. Cheese, yogurt, milk, fish, right? These are the sources for calcium. There's also, interestingly, there's also green leafy vegetables. So broccoli is very rich in calcium. You also have kale, cabbage. These are very good, and they contain low oxalates, which you are trying to avoid if you're trying to increase the amount of calcium in your body, okay? In Canada, most of the foods you'll be eating that are processed will have calcium, even if it's not supposed to have calcium. It's because one of the regulation in Canada is to fortify foods with calcium, potassium, and iron, okay? So if you take anything and you look at it and it does not seem like it's supposed to have calcium, but it has calcium, it's because it was added there, okay? And this is just to help. In the case of calcium, it's because we are in the higher, we're in a higher latitude, and so not throughout the year we don't have as much sun as we should be, and sun is an important factor in producing vitamin D naturally, okay? And so Health Canada, it takes care of this by making kind of these producers of processed food add calcium to these foods, okay? So if you find calcium on something and it's kind of weird, it's because it was added there, okay? What else? Deficiency. So over time, if you don't take calcium as you're supposed to, it will lead to osteoporosis. And osteoporosis is just the breakdown of your bones, and they become less dense, right? This is related to the bones themselves. Additionally, what happens to your blood is that you have lower levels of calcium. And so this leads to hypocalcemia. And hypocalcemia, we kind of talked about it a little bit. It affects your blood pressure. It affects all these functions that we talked about here. Where is it? Sorry, guys. Right here, okay? Plays on blood clotting, so this is important. Affects many enzymes, nerve impulses, and whatnot. We talked about this last lecture, okay? What else? Sorry, guys. Obviously, if you're not taking enough minerals, you'll have muscle spasms. And if you're really deficient in calcium over time, you can start having convulsions. These muscle spasms, I told you it's mostly magnesium, potassium, and calcium, okay? And so if you ever have these kind of cramps and whatnot, it's because of one of these guys, okay? Vitamin D. Maybe this is a little bit more interesting. Have you ever asked yourself, how does the sun make vitamin D? Well, let me tell you. So vitamin D, there's a molecule in your skin called 7-dehydrocholesterol, which needs to be activated. And to be activated, it requires UV light. And so UV light is important for the conversion of this 7-dehydrocholesterol into cholecalciferol, okay, which is kind of the inactive, the secondary substrate, which is still inactive vitamin D3. Then this, aka provitamin. So whenever a vitamin is not in its active form, it's called a provitamin. Just like whenever an enzyme is not active, it's called a zymogen. So this is the kind of the analogous thing for vitamins. And so this cholecalciferol will get activated in your liver, okay, and it gets converted into calcidiol and whatnot, and then it goes to your kidneys, and your kidneys are the final step in converting the vitamin, this molecule here, into active vitamin D, okay? As you can see, there are sterol rings, and you saw the word cholesterol, so cholesterol is very important for this vitamin here, okay? Yeah, that's enough information for you guys. And so there's many things that control the synthesis of vitamin D. It's one of the vitamins that you don't really need to do anything to get except stay in the sun for a few minutes. Obviously, if you are in the winter months, like here in Canada, between October and February, its production is very low. If you're in higher altitude latitudes like us, you'll have lower, even though the sun sometimes in January is kind of strong, it's not because it is strong. It feels strong because there's the reflection on the snow and you feel like it's actually strong, but the intensity is not, okay? And so the sun during the winter here is not strong enough. I mean, it's weak. You still produce vitamin D, but not to the point where you have enough to be kind of healthy, okay? Obviously, the times of the day, this is an obvious one. Don't go outside at 10 p.m. and try to get vitamin D. What else? The older your skin gets thicker, and because it gets thicker, there's less absorption of these rays. If you're putting sunscreen, makes sense, cloudy weather, whatnot. What else? And the opposite is true, right? If you're younger, you absorb better. If you are in warmer countries that are closer to the equator, you stay a good 5 minutes outside and you have enough for the whole day. And usually you try to do it between 9 and 3 p.m. Okay. So if there are easy ways to get vitamin D like this, why do some people supplement in vitamin D? Anybody? No? Yes?
No, because let's say in the winter I sit home all the time and I don't get out on the street because it's cold.
Yeah.
Is vitamin D from that?
True, true. So obviously if you're in the winter here and you're not taking, you're not going out so much, then you're probably going to have low vitamin D. Deficiency in vitamin D has many consequences. It can lead to anemia, for example. Okay, so it has a few functions. I'll tell you about the functions, and then we'll get into what happens when you have a deficiency. Okay, so the main reason why I'm talking about vitamin D in terms of bone health, it's because it regulates the blood calcium levels, as we've seen in that graph previously. It also plays a role in phosphorus absorption. So this is also important. There's one of the transporters for calcium that is called the TRPV6 in the intestine, is regulated by vitamin D. I'm not expecting you to learn it by heart. It's just to tell you that there are transporters that are regulated by these vitamins. Okay, and so vitamin D supplementation, what it will do is that it will activate the processes to produce this protein here and increase the amount of this protein on the enterocyte. Okay, so that's that. It stimulates osteoclasts when there is calcium is needed somewhere else. For example, when your blood pH increases, then vitamin D is going to be activated and stimulate these osteoclasts to break down the outer layer of the bone. It is also required for bone calcification, so the opposite process, right? If you have vitamin D or don't have vitamin D, so it has a dual role. And one thing that is important is that it helps in the differentiation of cells. So osteoblasts and osteoclasts require vitamin D to become what they are. When they are pluripotent stem cells, to become osteoblasts and osteoclasts, they require vitamin D. Okay, this is important. There are two sources of vitamin D. Some of them can come from plants and supplements. Usually this is the algocalciferol, the D2. But the best one that you want is the D3. So this is the cholecalciferol, which is more potent and comes from animal foods and sun. Okay. Obviously, food does not contain that much vitamin D because it's kind of not metabolized by use quickly and modified quickly, and it gets inactivated also. And so the best source remains the sun, obviously, but you can also get it from fortified foods. And fortified foods, I told you, this is pretty much anything that you buy in the grocery store. Okay. Sorry, not anything you buy in the grocery store. Anything, I was thinking about calcium. Vitamin D is found in fortified foods, like usually it's dairy products, okay, that have a lot of vitamin D. Sometimes you'll buy cereals, that have a lot of vitamin D as well. Fish has a lot of vitamin D as well. This I talked about. Obviously, this is a fat-soluble vitamin, and so it follows the same process as lipids. That means it enters the body as kilomicrons, and then goes to the liver, and the liver carries it as VLDL, LDL, and whatnot. Okay, because it is a fat-soluble vitamin. Surprisingly, salmon is very rich in vitamin D. More than milk, which is kind of surprising to me, but anyways. The adequate intake. So as you can see, you don't need that much of it. 10 to 20 micrograms a day, depending on your age. And so when we're talking about the adequate intake from Health Canada, this assumes that the person's sun exposure is inadequate, because it's almost impossible or very hard to not get enough vitamin D. You need to kind of close the curtains and stay in your house for like a few days during the winter to kind of to become deficient on it, let's say. Okay, but it is possible. Okay, so what happens when you have a deficiency? When you have a deficiency in vitamin D, obviously it's going to affect your calcium metabolism, transport, and whatnot, everything related to metabolism, and so you will start losing bone mass, okay, because your body has decrease the amount of transporters, so you're not absorbing calcium anymore, and so you will start losing bone mass because of that, because you need to absorb the calcium to be able to use it. Additionally, what was I saying here? And this deficiency can happen from actually not being able to absorb vitamins, fat-soluble vitamins, okay? It's very hard to get this, as I told you, but it can happen. If you are a child and you don't have enough vitamin D, you will develop this kind of disorder, let's say, called rickets, where you've probably seen kids like this, right? Where you have the feet kind of open in a weird shape. So this is called rickets, and it's because the kids were deficient in vitamin D for a while, okay? And this affects the mineralization and the growth of the skeleton. Yes? Yeah?
The proteins responsible for uptake of calcium are dependent on vitamin D. What complementary role vitamin D plays with calcium that the body prefers to not to absorb it if there is no vitamin D?
Oof, repeat that. Repeat that.
Why vitamin D? Why should body use vitamin D?
Why does the body use vitamin D?
Why vitamin D is required to transport calcium?
It's not the only thing. It's not the only thing. So if, right, okay, I see where, that's kind of an existential question, but let me try to answer it. There are different physiological processes in your body that happen, okay? And each process is usually governed by one main molecule, okay? For example, in the case of eating food, there is insulin that gets released in the bloodstream to signal the body to do many different things, including stop eating, get tired a little bit and fall asleep, including start absorbing glucose, turn it into glycogen, turn it in adipose tissue, and whatnot. Okay. In the case of calcium, it's not the only thing that controls calcium absorption, but vitamin D is a major player, right? As I said previously, in metabolism, let's say, it's a chain reaction of things happening, right? And so all the physiological input that you're getting from outside, from the food and from your body, will kind of converge onto something. That thing that is being converged on is vitamin D, in part, but there's also calcitonin and whatnot. Make sense? Kind of good. If you are deficient in vitamin D in the adult stage, you'll have osteoporosis, of course. Now, obviously, you can also have toxicity from vitamin D if you're over supplementing, and this will basically lead to hypercalcemia, right? So if you're taking too much vitamin D, that will induce the uptake of calcium and whatnot and lead to hypercalcemia. Hypercalcemia affects all the 7 processes that I talked about, including blood pressure, nerve impulse, and whatnot, because it disrupts the fluid balance in part, okay? But the other problem with taking too much vitamin D is that your soft tissue becomes overcalcified, okay? And this is not good because it will make your soft tissue, which is supposed to be soft, more rigid, and that can lead to lesions and whatnot, okay? The excess of vitamin D is stored in the adipose tissue and in the liver adipose tissue, because the liver has some adipose tissue on it, just like any other fat-soluble vitamins, okay? Next, phosphorus. I talked about this. I'm going to go quickly. Negatively charged. It plays a role in ATP, DNA, RNA, because part of them is the phosphorus. Phospholipids. Creatine phosphate, I told you about this. So creatine phosphate is the longer-term energy storage in muscles. So ATP gets converted into creatine phosphate. And phosphorus is also part of the hydroxyapatite mineral, which is what gives you structure, kind of the strength to your bones and teeth, okay? The sources, as I mentioned previously, milk, meats, eggs. Soft drinks contain phosphorus also. It's written on the list as phosphoric acid. Forget about this. I don't want to get into this. But in processed food, phosphorus is added also because it helps for moisture retention. In part, it helps for the smoothness of the food, which is usually more appealing to eat. If you consume too much, you're going to have issues with your muscles, convulsion. It's basically the same thing repeating all over, okay? Minerals, they play a role in pretty much anything. They affect your muscles, nerves, and whatnot. And so you can pretty much think of it as the same thing for all of them, okay? There's people that take a lot of antacids because of the gastric reflux or whatnot. This contains a lot of phosphorus, and this can lead to too much phosphorus in your bloodstream, okay? If you don't take enough, this is very rare, but it can happen because of alcohol abuse, premature infants, or elderly people who are not taking up enough food, okay? The mechanisms and all that, if you're interested in them, we can talk about that later on, but just know that these affect the amount of phosphorus, okay? Magnesium, yeah?
About phosphorus.
Yeah.
So it means that if someone goes to the doctor and receives like I have phosphorus deficiency,
Yeah.
he should drink Coca-Cola to replenish it?
Yeah, you can do that. Obviously not, but I don't think it contains enough phosphorus to, if I remember, the RDA for phosphorus is 700 milligrams or something like this. And so I don't think you'll get that from Coca-Cola, but maybe you'll get supplements, okay? Magnesium. So magnesium is also found in the bone structure, obviously, because we're talking about bones. It's a cofactor, so this is one of the main cofactors of enzymes, okay? If you're doing research or if you're studying enzymes or whatnot, you'll talk about magnesium all the time, and you'll be using solutions to prevent magnesium from messing up your enzymes, and because it interacts with many enzymes. It's required for ATP, DNA, proteins, obviously, because it's part of the components of these, okay? It's important for vitamin D metabolism, so magnesium affects the metabolism of vitamin D because it's part of the enzymes of the pathway of activating vitamin D, okay? So magnesium is a cofactor of enzymes in this process, okay? What else? Helps in muscle contraction for the 10th time. Helps in blood clotting, same thing as calcium, okay? Calcium is the initiator of blood clotting. This one here is not the initiator, but it helps in blood clotting. Obviously, your kidneys regulate everything, including magnesium, and so vitamin D can also signal back to absorb magnesium, so it's kind of a feedback loop where the levels of one control the levels of the other, because you don't want to have too much magnesium and too much vitamin D. You want to make sure that it's kept balanced, and so if you have low magnesium, vitamin D will kind of trigger the absorption and whatnot, okay? Same thing as the others, alcohol interacts with them, and because it interacts with them, it will basically affect their absorption. There's also phytates, if you remember, that I told you about, which bind to them, and there are fibers. So fibers bind magnesium as well, because these molecules are complex, and they don't get digested necessarily, and so they will bind to it and make it kind of lead to its excretion with everything else, right? Alcohol interacts with magnesium. This is why it decreases the intestinal absorption. It's because there's a reaction that happens between the two, making new molecules, okay? The sources, pumpkin, muffins, surprisingly. The RDA is based on the age and gender, obviously like everything else, and the upper limit is 350 milligrams a day. So you don't need much of it. This is the maximum. Above that, you start having problems. The sources are just for your own information. It's not exam material. If you consume too much, just like anything else, you will start having these GI tract kind of symptoms, diarrhea, nausea, cramps, and whatnot. This is because your body is trying to get rid of the extra magnesium. You will also have issues with the acid base balance in your blood and in the remainder of your body. Too much of it is called hypermagnesemia, and usually you have this problem because you have impaired kidney function. Your body is very good at filtering everything. If you are reaching these high levels of hypermagnesemia or high levels of sodium like hypernatremia, it's because your kidney is not doing its job properly, okay? Usually it requires an impaired kidney function. If you don't consume enough, well, this is important for your bone, and so if you don't have enough, this will lead to osteoporosis, heart disease, because it controls also the contractions of your heart, and affect the blood pressure because of that fluid balance that I told you about, okay? Fluoride. This one here is a little bit controversial. You have to be careful with this one. There's people that wash their teeth 10 times a day, and they take Crest, those mouthwash 10 times a day. So you have to be careful with that, okay? Because it's very easy to get too much, okay? Because the numbers for passing the limit are very small. You don't even need that much of it, and you get most of it just from brushing your teeth, okay? So the main source of it is dental products. It's not even food, okay? So fluoride is important also for bones and teeth, and because you don't need that much of it, it's a trace mineral, right? And so this is important for maintaining your teeth and bones, okay? It will combine with calcium and phosphorus and act like an antibacterial agent to protect from bacteria, okay? This is why it's found in toothpaste. The amount. So the adequate intake depends again through those demographics, but it's between 1 to 4 milligrams a day. If you brush your teeth and you kind of spit it out, there's always a little bit left of fluoride stuck on your teeth, and usually that's sufficient to have kind of, if you brush your teeth 2 times a day, obviously. So water also, but not all water, but there is water that is kind of fluoridated, and this is just to prevent contamination and whatnot, kind of antibacterial effect. But not all bottled waters contain this. What happens? So, sorry for the pictures there, but if you consume too much of it, and you'll see this in kids. You'll see this in kids. Have you ever seen kids with teeth like this? No? Yes, you did? Yeah. So there are people, okay, I will talk in general to, I don't know where people come from and whatnot, but there are people that get too, not attached to the kid, you're supposed to be attached, but they get too protective of the kid. And so what that happens is that they clean the kid too much. And that kind of leads to this problem here, right? You think you are brushing your kid's teeth and you're making the kid clean and you're using this fluoride-containing toothpaste, and you know his mouth smells good, but then after a few months you end up getting this thing here, okay? It's because taking too much fluoride actually affects your teeth by increasing their protein content, and this is called fluorosis, very hard to say. Proteins will affect your the outer layer of your teeth called the enamel, and will make it porous, stained, and kind of have holes in it. Okay, this is not too much of a problem when you are a kid, because you will lose these teeth, obviously, and you can see this is baby teeth, not adult teeth. Okay, you see it by these little parts here. Okay. If you don't consume enough, you get the same effect, but instead you just have holes in your teeth because of bacteria and whatnot, the acid that the bacteria secretes. So in both cases you get holes. One of them is due to the acid and bacteria, because you are preventing your body from, you are not providing it the fluoride that will interact with calcium and phosphorus to prevent bacteria from growing. And in the opposite, it's because the fluorosis will increase the protein content on the enamel, and that affects the teeth. Okay? You want to take a break? Or do I just continue? So I feel like this 56 slides are more like 75. Okay, I'll continue then. We're almost done. What is osteoporosis? I'm talking about it nonstop. So low bone density. It's because your bone tissue is deteriorating, and it's deteriorating because of its own self. It's because it's resorbing more than forming. This leads to fragile bones and bone fracture risk. I said everything about this earlier in the lecture. One thing that it does is that if you see older people, they tend to kind of compress, let's say, like this, the older they get, and this is just because they are kind of losing bone density, and their bones are not dense enough to handle their body weight, and so they start tilting like this, okay? If it's very pronounced, you end up with the kind of something called kyphosis, which is the hump that you get on the back. So if you've seen people with a hump on the back, that's usually either due to a genetic thing or it's caused by osteoporosis, okay? Because the bones kind of start pushing against the back, okay? And so you end up with this kyphosis thing. So the vertebra is kind of tilted, and that leads to a pressure here. And if you have a pressure here, that will, your bones here will start pushing outside. Yes?
Possible to reverse that kind of?
No. It's not, you cannot reverse it, you can just maintain it. This is something that when it's activated, it's because the cells in your body that are breaking the bone beat the cells that are building it. And so they are kind of more efficient and stronger than the osteoblasts. Okay? Yes?
Is the pain comparable to when the bones are breaking, like by an accident?
The pain?
The pain, because that looks painful.
Yeah. Actually, it's not that you don't feel that much pain. It's just what it does is that this causes your body to get tired faster. But there isn't a pain that comes from it. Maybe here, I'm not sure if there's something.
I hear a lot of people like with osteoporosis, like that their hands like hurt so much and be very active.
Osteoporosis or arthritis? Yeah, arthritis hurts. Osteoporosis, I'm not sure it hurts because your body gets used to it, right? And so it just becomes more tired and tired. It requires more energy to do the same effort. Yes, Nikita? You're done? Okay. Risk factors. Being old, of course. The list is long. There's many things that affect it. One of the interesting ones is smoking. Smoking plays a big role on your bones, and there are many other things. Okay, I put them here just for your information, but obviously you don't have to learn this list here. The stuff that you need to know related to osteoporosis is the age. So the age is a very important factor in terms of for osteoporosis. Usually the way it goes through is that you reach a certain age, like 70s or whatnot, then you end up getting osteoporosis, and then when you get osteoporosis, the next thing is you go out during the winter and you just slip and you break something, right? You've probably heard of old people breaking their hips or whatnot. It's because in part of this here. This is because if you fall, you will not break your hip. But older people, because they have this deteriorating bone structure, they will kind of be more prone to breaking, okay, because of the density. 1 in 4 women over the age of 50, and 50 is an important number, I'll tell you why, has osteoporosis, okay? So around the age of 50, what happens is that women reach what? Menopause. I don't know why they called it menopause, but menopause, okay? And so what happens at this phase of life is that the amount of estrogen in your body and other hormones kind of changes, okay? And because it changes, it decreases, this affects the bone density. And so this is why I'm specifically talking about women. It's because estrogen levels kind of decline at that age. And because they decline, they have a direct effect on osteoporosis. How? Probably estrogen, you can link it to vitamin D, okay? Somehow in the pathway, okay? Additionally, as you grow older, you have less vitamin D metabolism, and this is just linked to the fact that your metabolism itself kind of starts shutting down as you get older. It becomes less and less efficient and slower and slower with time. Gender, this I just talked. If I told you that 1 in 4 women after the age of 50 get osteoporosis because they are more predisposed due to this fact. This is due to the low estrogen. I'm talking about the slides right before. Anyways, the other thing that is kind of a problem is adolescent girls that are undergoing extreme dieting can affect these and can lead to osteoporosis, okay? What else? And then obviously different classes have different risks, and this is just linked to genetics, right? Caucasian women that have lower body weight usually have a higher risk for osteoporosis if they have someone else that got it, okay? So it has a genetic component, let's say. Cigarettes. Smoking affects hormones, obviously. People smoke to feel good, sometimes to just because it's a reflex, but the main reason is because it plays a role on the hormones, and those hormones affect bone formation and resorption. And so smoking is one of the major factors in developing osteoporosis. Caffeine also leads to loss of calcium. It's a diuretic, and so this diuretic will lead to more elimination of calcium. And obviously, low calcium and vitamin D makes sense. Physical activity, I told you that if you're working out, your body will start building muscles, but also bone. They'll get bigger. And so if you don't exercise, that leads to your brain thinking, okay, I don't need as much structure to hold all this mass, and so the resorption will be stronger than the formation. Okay, I've seen it happen to myself. My bones were even smaller than this, but as I started working out, you feel like they're getting kind of bigger. They don't get as big. Yeah.
Does this process take like a long period of time? Or is it
The bone building.
yeah.
Not a fact, but if my memory is good, it's about if consistently you're working out after 6 months, you should see your like, for example here, you should see that it's becoming a little bit bigger and bigger, right? But obviously, I've been working out for a while, so it took time to get, but even this is nothing. But if you saw it before, I just keep following, right? And so, what else? What type of activity you need to do? Not any activity. You can't just be running and, you need, this is a mistake here. You need to have weight-bearing activities, okay? So you need to be using weights, because these weights will kind of erase this, okay? This is a mistake here. You need weight-bearing activities, so that means activities that require additional weight to what you have in your body, okay? So, you can use your own body's weight, and your body will consider it as additional weight. For example, if you're doing calisthenics, calisthenics is where you're just working out without using any weight. It's those people you see in the videos just doing chin-ups and whatnot, okay? And so these are weight-bearing in a sense because they use your body weight. But usually, if you want to increase the amount of bone, the bone mass, you will go with something more like lifting or whatnot. Okay. Your brain needs to understand. I need more bone mass to handle the weight that is given to me. Okay. Treatment, there's no treatment, but you can manage it. If you get osteoporosis, you can control this obviously by giving the bones what they need, which is vitamin D, calcium, exercise, and there are some medications that prevent resorption of calcium.